Hi, everybody. Welcome into another edition, episode 2 of Cross Functionality, the show about baseball and softball coaching, male and female, hosted by former college baseball and softball players. My name is Jim, and let me bring in professional coach. She is a former softball national champion, my friend and co host, Cassie Reilly-Boccia. Cassie, how are you?
Doing great. So excited for today.
You
Last week
know,
was fun.
I,
This week's gonna be better.
I have to apologize and just uh, address the elephant in the room, if you will, right off the bat. Last week, and people will notice it when they watch and they listen, that I said your last name wrong. Now, in my defense, everybody has been saying my last name wrong for my entire life, which is why I only say Jim. I don't even.
There's no harm, no foul. That was
No,
completely fine.
I have to ask, when you get married later in
Mm.
the year, is it going to be now like three names attached to your first name? How's that going to work? I don't mean to turn this into like a morning zoo type radio deal, but I do have to know. I'm very curious.
Sorry, it broke up for a second, but all I heard is when I get married. Are you asking about my last name?
Yeah, what are you going to do about your last name?
So I will legally change my last name, but probably professionally still go as Reilly-Boccia, just because
Okay.
that I think is known in the softball community right now. My
Okay.
last name will be Honigsberg, though, so it's
Konigsberg.
it's still long, but no need any hyphens on that long of a last name.
So here we are, episode 2 of Cross Functionality. Last week we talked about your journey to becoming the high school Gatorade Player of the Year for New York. Now, today we're discussing you signing with the University of Alabama, being recruited, and when that entire process started. Now, I'm not sure. I did my research, and I think it's the same. I didn't really get much information on it, but it seems like that the recruiting process still begins now for at least most sports. It begins, the official time when you can talk to a player is July. That was when it was for us in 2007, and of course 2008. But for you, when did the whole recruiting process start, and when did you think that you could be going to a big time Division I school?
So September 1st of my junior year was the first time they were allowed to send letters.
Mhm.
So that was a big date. I remember school was just about to start and getting these first wave of letters that were like a little bit more personalized. They weren't just like, hey, sign up for camp, because I think that's really all they're allowed to do before that is send something like a flyer for camp. But
Mhm.
these are really personalized letters, and that was really cool. And that was the first time I was like, okay, I think I can play D1 in the area, but I
Mhm.
still had it stuck in my head. I was going to go to a small D1 school for academics, and I was probably going to stay close to home. That was at least like my initial, when I went into the recruiting process, that's where I thought I was going to end up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, because your mindset, where it was thinking that, okay, I can only go to a smaller Division I school, but then all of a sudden, and you mentioned this last week, how played on national teams, you played on teams that played against other powerhouse teams across the country, and your confidence seemed to just continue to drift upwards and upwards and upwards, and all of a sudden here you are getting these looks while also having to fight that stereotype of being a Northeast type player.
Oh, for sure. That was, it's funny. I don't even think I consciously realized that I was insecure about being from the Northeast, playing against all these players
Hmm.
until, it was like where you really sit down and you're like, do I feel like I'm at a disadvantage just because I'm from the Northeast? And I really had to wrestle with that. And I really do try to talk to my athletes about that now. But yeah, I think, September 1st happens and I go into that fall play. And fall ball is huge for softball. It's, I don't know exactly what it is in the baseball realm right now. A lot of our baseball athletes opt out of playing in the fall, but softball is just such an impactful season to have in the fall.
Hmm.
And that was probably the best softball I had played to date of my life.
Hmm.
And it was almost like every weekend I played, I was like, okay, maybe I can play a little bit of a bigger D1. And then, you start to hear my travel ball coach comes and says, hey, this school's interested in you. This school's interested in you. And I think that fall is really when it started to snowball. So it's funny, you work your entire life for like a 4-month, 5-month period of time
Hmm.
for your recruiting process. But yeah, it was that fall of 2006, I guess it was really a big year.
Right. Well, be sure to, and we're going to continue to crack this nut open here today. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast. We are on Apple, Google, Spotify. We also are on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. My other podcast, for the record, I don't know how much you listen to Amazon Music, Cass, but my other podcast is not on Amazon Music, but Cross Functionality is, and also to our YouTube page, Softball Strength Academy. Subscribe to that and watch video episodes and clips as well. Now, let's continue to go forward from your timeline of 2006, because not a lot of athletes could relate to being recruited that early. What did that feel like for you? What was the feeling that you had? Was it something of recognition? Was it a huge confidence booster? Was it you thinking maybe they're just sending out letters to a lot of girls and I'm not the only one that they're really interested in? What was your mindset at that point?
Yeah, it's funny. I had coaches my entire life tell me, hey, you have a great swing. You're going to be a great athlete. You could go to a big D1. And I didn't really believe, these are like my personal coaches. I didn't really, honestly, truly believe anyone. Maybe maybe they're just saying it. They're trying to get me to play better. And it wasn't until I started getting those letters that I was like, oh, maybe I can. So it was almost like this validation period. And it's interesting because if I could go back to myself right now, I'd shake myself and be like, stop being validated by someone else's opinion of you. But softball was so closely tied to my identity. I felt like I was known for it. And I almost felt like that was the expectation. Like, well, you're from the Northeast, you have this potential. How do you not say yes to some of these bigger schools? How do you how do you say no and just stay at home? So I almost felt like, and it wasn't a bad burden, but I almost felt like I really wanted to be the person that could represent the Northeast and could make a go of it and try to play at a big D1 and maybe make it to the World Series and maybe win a World Series. And I just started to crave it. And that, if anything, every letter I got, I felt like I worked extra hard the next day at the gym, or I don't know, it just was, or I hit more balls off the tee the next day. It honestly wasn't stressful until I had a friend commit in like January. And that was
January of 2007.
2007. So committing January of your junior year. So not getting to that July 1st mark where you could talk.
Yeah, that's strange for me. Let's dive into that, because I'm not sure. Is that legal? Because I got my first call in July of the official date when you can call somebody, July of 2007. How did that work? What was that process like? And actually, what were you thinking too? Were you kind of like, what about me?
Well, no, not even. I just was like, oh, I didn't know we were going to have to make decisions soon. Like that, it kind of dawned on me. And softball has gone through this giant roller coaster recently. So my recruiting class was really the first class that started to commit early. And the reason you could do it is if you went to a visit on campus, you could talk to the coach on campus, and people were committing on these unofficial visits or committing at camps. And a verbal commitment really meant nothing, but all of a sudden my class was the first time you didn't wait. People weren't waiting till July 1st, and that was unheard of before my year. And then all of a sudden I started hearing about people younger than me, freshmen, sophomores committing to Tennessee, committing here. And it was just, I don't know. I just so had it in my head, like, okay, it'll happen after July 1st. So that was a stressor. And then, the second Alabama came into the picture, I think people in school started talking about it. And I had teachers sitting me down after class and being like, you're making the biggest mistake of your life.
Why is that? Interesting.
They wanted me to go to an academic school. And I think they thought you use softball as a vehicle to get you into an Ivy, to get you into, some type of school with academic clout. And I don't think they saw necessarily, you have no professional future with softball. Why are you going to throw away the rest of your life for 4 years of softball? But I think that's a lot of times people that don't quite understand. Of course, you don't pick a school just for softball, but that doesn't mean you only pick a school for academics. Like it has to be this full package. And if softball was such a huge part of my life, why not allow it to continue to be a big part of my life? So honestly, those two times are really the only times I remember feeling a little bit more stress. Like, oh, okay, where am I going to end up? And maybe my timeline is now not 6 months, but 1 month. And that definitely felt like it increased the heat on the decisions.
It's an amazing dichotomy there, because last week you mentioned how a lot of college coaches won't go after the Northeast player. Well, you have people in the Northeast in your school telling you, hey, don't go down south because you won't get as good of education, yet I mean, here you are. You've got
It worked
your
out. It definitely worked
master's.
out. Yeah.
It definitely worked out well. Now I have to ask you, because there's a lot of ways I can go with this, and we'll get to the question I have about camps, and if you went to any of these quote unquote recruitment camps. But I have to just ask you flat out, how many calls did you actually get when it was official that coaches could call you?
So I actually didn't even make it. I ended up verbally committing May of my junior
Okay.
year. So I never made it to the point where coaches could call me on the phone. I got a lot of letters though.
Okay.
So I got my parents helped me keep them organized. I have
Mhm.
2 binders full still at my parents'
Wow.
house of schools.
And these were letters that were what was the content in some of these letters? Were they personally written? Did they seem like they were generic?
No, we didn't really save them as much as the generic ones. I
Mhm.
guess I think back to 2007, 2008, we had email, but it wasn't
Correct.
accessible in your back pocket.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering just how many of these physical letters are actually now replaced by an email. But
Mhm.
personal, I went and saw you this past weekend, going on about they're about to come see me play, what they wanted to. So I'm sure parts of it were generic, like here's what we can offer from the what academic programs we have, whatever it may be. But it was certainly coaches that I did have a relationship with, and that I could make the phone call too. So there was a handful at the end, maybe 5 or 6 that I had spoken on the phone with, but I had initiated that phone call.
Okay. And who were those 5 and 6?
So we had Alabama,
Mhm.
Stanford,
Yeah.
Northwestern, um, Georgia Tech,
Mhm.
and that might have been the 4 on the phone. I did go and visit Michigan in person. Even if they weren't interested, I was in the area and I went and visited Michigan and Notre Dame when I was over there.
Yeah.
But Hofstra, Fordham,
Mhm.
those schools in the area. But those are the few that I was like thinking, okay, maybe these will be the ones.
And so you chose Alabama. Now, did you go on any those official type visits?
So you can't go on an official visit until fall of your senior year, and
Okay. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
when. Yeah, I know it's
It's crazy that you could sign, but you can't go on an official visit.
yeah. You know what, they might have changed that now for softball. They might have allowed the official visits to happen a little bit sooner. But
Mhm.
I unofficially
Yeah.
visited Northwestern, Stanford, and Alabama. Those were the big 3 that I went with the coaches and were really truly considering. And gosh, kudos to my parents for flying me all over the country for this. But they thought it was important. They're like, this is going to be a big deal for you, and I just I appreciate that tremendously. But yeah, those were the last 3, and it's so cool to get toward. I think it's just colleges are cool in general. So like
Yeah.
Penn State as well. I almost forgot that was actually my very first visit.
And that's where I will be visiting my cousins in September.
Oh, there you go.
I'll
Yeah,
be going for the first time.
I thought I wanted to go to a small school, and then I went on a visit to Penn State, and I
Mhm.
saw a football game, and I was like, okay, this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I might want a big school. Um, so Penn State might have like really pushed me in the direction of actually saying yes to a visit to Alabama, because I really, truly, honestly didn't think I wanted to go that far away. I didn't think I wanted to go to Alabama. It just, I don't know, just clicked.
Okay. And what led you to that decision then? Describe that clicking part for me, because
Yeah.
you kind of get that now in all aspects of life. Something just clicks,
Yes.
and it's the right thing.
I got the first email, because you get 2 binders worth of emails and letters,
Oh
and
yeah.
it said, "We hope you can become a part of the Alabama softball family one day." And I think that's like fairly common now to call a team a family, but I just for some reason it really stood out. I don't remember seeing that on many teams' letters,
Right.
like a family. And I was like, okay. And I was so nervous about being homesick. My entire family lives in this area.
Mhm.
And when I went down on the visit, I went to give the coach a handshake, and he hugged me. And that happened with all the coaches and all the players, and I got this big bear hug. And I couldn't get over how comfortable I felt with the team, and I couldn't get over just I went in February to watch a softball game, and I think
Mhm.
it actually really clicked when I saw how green the grass was, and it was 70
Yeah.
degrees in February, and I was like, okay, this is what playing softball in the South is going to be like. Like, you get to play outside year round, and you can say that, but then when you experience it, something else clicked in me. I just started to think like how cool it would be to be a part of the script A, just to be able to say, yeah, I was a member of the University of Alabama. I got to play under this coaching staff. I got to play with these athletes. I just couldn't stop thinking about it after I left.
So be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Juntara, and Cassie is at Coach_Cassie RB, as in running back, but RB. Yeah, I for me, and again, I'm not trying to compare myself to you. I did make a couple of visits, and I didn't decide until the fall of my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
I had some apprehension about going too far away. That was just, I can admit that now, many years later. But for you, was there any apprehension? I know you just described your experience with Alabama, but there was that Penn State factor there, and
Right.
You knew, hey, big football school. Beautiful softball field. I actually played on their baseball field, so I know a little bit about their athletic complex, and I'm comfortable in saying that they have beautiful facilities. Was there still that pull maybe to stay a little bit closer to home, or was Alabama just a slam dunk?
I think when I thought of, there's still this like to the back of my head, because before any happened, I was 12, and my parents had actually just gotten married. And I was watching the World Series, and I looked at the two of them, and I said, I think I want to play there one day. And that was what they took my dream and just like never pushed, but just said, how can we help this grow? And not that I felt like I owed anything to them, but in the back of my head, I just thought, if I'm actually capable of achieving that, how can I not go to Alabama? And I really thought that was going to be my best chance at making it to the World Series and potentially winning a national championship. And again, that wasn't the end all be all. That's not how I'd made 100% of my decision, but I just felt like the rest of my life I would have been wondering, well, what if you did do that? And there was no other school that I had a what if with. Yeah. I felt like I was going to be able to, even if I went for it and failed miserably, I at least would have been able to sleep at night the rest of my life knowing I went for it. So,
what was one school that was a little bit smaller that was in the running?
So Stanford had like only 8,000 people. That was, if I had to pick my like criteria for a perfect school, I wanted high academics, really competitive softball. And they had a phenomenal program. At that point, I think I was like, all right, if I'm going a plane away, what does it matter if it's 6 hours or 3 hours? But I mean, how could you say, I really started to kick myself talk about opportunity. I'm like, okay, well, do I say no to this academic opportunity? But when I went, I realized that wasn't going to be the place I was going to be able to be the best version of myself. I just knew there was a potential version of myself that existed. And I just was trying to figure out where I could go to help fill that gap. And I'm glad I made the decision I did, because there was a lot of people that said you're insane for not going to Stanford.
And I'm just curious, what people were those?
Oh, aunts, uncles, friends of the family, like other,
the extended family. They always think they know everything.
Well, you know what? And it's funny too, because like news spread. So it'd be like parents of athletes that I played against that they were like, I hear you're trying to make a decision. Let me give you my 2 cents. Right.
Yeah. They're in your shoes. Now, and we'll get to just the recruitment in 2022 and beyond, and what it's like now for all athletes. Right. We will get to that, but I want to touch on this point. After you signed with Alabama and you were geared up, ready to go, what was the rest of your high school career like for you, both academically and athletically, knowing that you had a place to go?
You know what's interesting, and I'm so glad I experienced this, because I thought it was going to be this like, oh, okay, here's a relief. That's one less thing I have to worry about. But it was, yes, you did experience that in one sense, but now every time you stepped to the plate, you were the girl going to Alabama. And if you ever got out, if you ever didn't have a good game, like it was just, it felt, I'm so glad I had really good parents and really good coaches in my life to help guide me then, because that could have been consuming. And I think it does, that pressure, they rank players now in every class. And this, if I coach a girl who's ranked number 4 in the country, she's like, yeah, I feel that. Like if I ever swing and miss, it's like they celebrate like crazy, and it's just, it's about keeping your blinders on and focusing on, okay, what's important now, and leaving the rest to the wayside. But that was really how my senior year went from a playing standpoint. As far as training, I still remember, I mean, people people would die to have something like that to train for. Like when you're struggling to eat right and you're like, well, what's your why? I'm going to the University of Alabama to play softball. That's my why. Like when you're struggling to get out of bed to condition, like what better why could you have? So there was, you know, motivation is like this drug for some people because it's fleeting and you need more of it. But that was all I needed. And so I felt like I was in the best shape of my life. I felt like I was the most disciplined I had ever been. And I just, you know, I used to talk with my dad about how hard we want to push the gas pedal. And like, you know, if anything, he was trying to help me make sure I wasn't wearing myself too thin before we get there. But yeah, that was, I still remember that year, just how geared up I was to start with that team.
You know, there was a time in 2006 when I was a sophomore and I was playing against a kid. His name was Billy Rowell. I don't know if you know that name. He was drafted by the Orioles, 9th overall in 2006. I'm playing first base, and he's a left-handed batter. And he hits one at me so hard that if I did not put my glove up to my face, I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now. That's how hard he hit it. This was the days before the exit velocity craze. Nevertheless, Billy Rowell was signed to play college baseball before getting drafted at the University of Alabama. And every single time he went to the plate, people were rooting against him. And every single time he swung and missed, there was a huge cheer. And every time he swung and missed and struck out, there was even a bigger cheer. So I understand, at least from a peripheral, what you mean about that added pressure for you when you go up to the plate every single time. And there's a lot of people rooting against you because of where you're going to school. Right.
Yeah. And it's like I said, I think social media probably would magnify it. Like we talk about differences now and then. The biggest thing that you had was a newspaper article that would get posted after the game. And you know what? I think the worst thing I had to deal with was I got walked 3 times in a game and someone published the headline of Reilly-Boccia goes hitless against. And I was like, come on.
Right. Go 0 for 2 with a walk. Yeah.
Or not even. I was 0 for 0 with 3 walks. And the headline was I went hitless. And I just realized I was like, you know, that is such a perception that has nothing to do with me. Like you talk about what you can control. But I do think, you know, I think how difficult it is for kids right now where they don't have just one headline in a local newspaper. It is something that's blasted on Twitter, something that's commented on Twitter, commented on forums, commented on, you know, I'm so thankful I didn't have to deal with that because I got to just go home and not worry about it, be with my family, you know, or go train with my coaches. And that's good. I think that was healthy for me at the time.
And with all this attention that you got, I'm assuming, I didn't ask this earlier, but I'm assuming, I wrote it down here, I should have asked it earlier, but I'm assuming that you picked up all conference, all state, that's where it stopped for me. So all region, were you all American?
I was not. Yeah, I don't know what the all American, what it was like for high school at that time. It was never an all American, but all state, all section, all league.
Okay. Yeah, and you were one of the, I guess, best players in your area, and one of the names that went on to play at a top school, right? There were other names as well? You mentioned one last week, but
yeah. So funny enough, that Section 1 softball in this time period, we ended up with Allie Gardner, who started off at UNC Wilmington, transferred to the University of Florida.
Okay.
Maddie Kuhn went to Stanford. Tammy Ray, LSU. Kirby Wright, Nebraska. Casey O'Connor, Notre Dame. All playing each other around the same time and in the same county. And that was like unheard of for our area. So I remember going to Alabama and being like, this is it. This is going to be like Northeast is going to make it now because like, look at all these names. And then it just,
right.
It's like a weird hotbed of athletes. And funny enough, a lot of those names I just mentioned, we got to train together with so my hitting coach at the time, I think really got a name for himself because he was sending these girls to big time schools out of the area. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I think honestly, that probably took pressure off of all of us because spotlight was shared in a good way, you know?
Yeah. But there has to be that mindset there that, okay, you look around at your peers, no disrespect to them, but you're saying, well, they're not really, I'm not saying you're saying this, maybe you are. I would have been. I was, because I was a D1 recruit. They're not really on my level. I'm looking at going after the big dogs. You know, you mentioned the gal who went to LSU, Maddie Kuhn. I remember Maddie because she was mentioned on last week's show, and the other gal who went to I don't know, where was the other school? UNC
Notre Dame,
Wilmington.
Nebraska,
No,
Florida.
yeah, Florida. You have to be. You're looking at them, right, and saying, okay, they're my competition because that's who I'm going to see the most at the next level.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny. None of them were pitchers in college, so I always used to view a pitcher as someone I would be like, nah, I'm going after you.
Yeah.
And another hitter was just, I'm like, all right, I don't have to deal with you, right? You know what I mean? So It was more. I loved travel ball at the time. I would every single time I'd go play. Someone would be like, oh, this pitcher is going to go play at UCLA next year. This pitcher is going to go play at Arizona. And I was like, nice. That's the one I want to be up against, right? Like I want to see you because I always, even if I struck out, even if I didn't do well then, I always felt like every time I saw a pitch from a pitcher, it was just putting tipping the scales in my favor. Every pitch was just tipping. I was going to be able to get a better advantage. So at least at the time, that was my mentality. I don't know if I actually looked at those girls as my competition.
Yeah. I guess it's different for guys. I don't know why.
Maybe, yeah. No, you're right. Because like if anything, girls are like very, very, very supportive, and it's overwhelming majority of the time, the guys in our facility are overly confident, and their confidence is here and their abilities here. And girls, it's the opposite. Their abilities here and their confidence is down here. So it's I think it is an interesting dynamic, especially for a high school female and male.
Yeah, I've talked about it on my other podcast too with Jake Epstein, the Lab Epstein Hitting podcast, about how baseball dads and there's some parodies out there on Instagram. I don't know if you've seen any, but of baseball dads, baseball coaches of kids coming up, it's just this aggression to it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's it seems like there's a different type of aggression with women, and seems to travel all the way up. And too, also with college softball too, it seems like the girls are chanting, and it just seems like they're having a lot more fun. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. College baseball is great, but it just seems like softball, you're having a little bit more fun.
I would agree. It does seem like that for the majority of the time.
Yeah. Be sure to like our episode, leave a review. We do appreciate that. And email us your questions, comments, concerns, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com, or of course leave a review, concern, or question in the comments section. Softball Strength Academy are watching the show, of course, on YouTube. We do appreciate that. Episode 2, Cross Functionality. We're talking today about Cassie and her journey to signing with the University of Alabama, the Crimson Tide. And we will, of course, get to coaching points as we move the show along here in the coming weeks. We're just trying to get to know Cassie and get to know her journey a little bit better, to her coaching career, a very successful one at that. So let me ask you this: with everything going on today, here's our main event question. Everything going on with all the social media out there now, TikTok and Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch, and I mean, there's so many I can't even. We're doing I just found this new stream that we're streaming on yesterday. So I'm learning something new every day. With all these new websites, recruiting for you back then wasn't as hard because there was a lot of attention, but now everything's magnified. What kind of advice would you give for recruits, both high major D1, mid-level D1, or even D1, D2, D3, and try and just block out that noise of everything as it comes to recruiting and as it pertains to all the social media?
Yeah, it's I do not envy athletes trying to get recruited right now. I really, really don't. They come in and if the athlete doesn't feel the stress, you look at the parent and they're like, what camp do I do? What team do I put this girl on? What about NIL? And they're trying to, we can't take tactics for recruiting that worked 5 years ago and apply them to today. It's NIL and the transfer portal have completely changed our sport. The other thing is the sport has gotten big. There's big money contracts for these coaches. So similar to basketball, where you see coaches getting moved around every other season, softball's starting to experience that. So if I could advise an athlete, it would be to find a school that you fall in love with. Find something, don't just go after the coach. Don't just go after the clout of the team, because that changes year to year sometimes too. You have one team that makes it to the World Series. The next year they don't make playoffs. And so find a school that you're comfortable with, and comfort not being that you're not going to grow, but something that you're like, okay, I can be at that university or college, and I can see myself progressing my career. I can see myself getting better. And then, trust yourself in knowing that you're never going to say yes to a school that you're not comfortable with, but you're also not going to say no to a school that you have that good feeling about. And I think back in time now, if let's say my sophomore year, my coaches at Alabama left, I would 100% consider the transfer portal, because who your coach is very important. And
Right.
I would at least consider it. So I think with that transfer portal, I don't like the idea of like, well, I don't like something, I'm just going to throw it in the bag and then go. But if a situation drastically changes for you, why do you have to endure a situation that's not good for you anymore? Why not drastically be able to change your situation too? So I do think the advice needs to shift a little bit, where we don't need to shame athletes for transferring, that they're not loyal. And that's not the case at all. There needs to be a mix of, okay, what's best for this athlete? How can I impact this team for the better? And you go from there.
You mentioned the transfer portal in there. I do wonder if now players are very, they recruit with the idea, or they get recruited and signed with the idea that, hey, you know what, if this doesn't work out after a year, I'm going right into the transfer portal. And I think that's, to me, is becoming, I've talked about this on my other podcast with Jake Epstein about colleges and the transfer portal, and how that's really affecting not only people who have been recruited and are going into college, but now, of course, the teams themselves.
Yeah, and I think, the transfer portal, it's hard to mention the transfer portal without NIL, because there's so many athletes now. I'm talking to college coaches in baseball too, and I'm that have had 3-4 different athletes leave, and he's like, yeah, they got offered big NIL deals at another college, and that's why the transfer happened. So there's this, it's not just, hey, this is how much scholarship you're going to get. This is like, hey, your school's going to get paid for, and in addition, here's a $20,000 contract for X, Y, and Z. And that is interesting.
That's a game changer.
Yeah, this is gonna and it's not just gonna change slowly. It's gonna change so fast. And so when I do have athletes that are asking me about this, I don't know enough to predict the immediate future right now. I don't know if anyone truly does, but I just think, again, finding good people to have in your life to help guide you, and then knowing that there's probably going to be a lot that changes in the next 4 years, and just to continue to be adaptable and roll with any punch. And it's probably going to be more and more uncommon to see a coach stay at a university for all 4 years, or athletes stay at a university for all 4 years. So starting to turn into a little bit more of like a professional sport
and
college.
I think we have to keep in mind too that's with softball, things are rapidly changing. The big money contracts, the TV ratings are going up. A lot of money has been infused into these programs, and a lot more eyes, I think, are on the product. It's a good thing. I think it's the same thing with college baseball, and so athletes are going to start. I think it might be a little bit slow with baseball and softball, but start getting those NIL deals and start getting some of those endorsements. That's what I see, because, like you mentioned before, there's a lot more eyes on the product.
Yep. Yeah. And it's not a bad thing. Like, I looked at NIL and I was like, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to females, because you go to, there's no true professional sport that you're able to make money. But if you played UNC soccer, I bet you could have made money in Chapel Hill. And if you played on Duke basketball or Alabama softball or Florida softball, whatever it is, like, there are these hotbeds where communities really, really support their college athletes. And then there's no professional outlet. Oklahoma, gosh, Jocelyn Alo, if she started 4 years ago, she probably, would be in a completely different position at the end of her career. So this is going to be good for female athletes. I just think everybody's going to have to learn how this works best for everyone involved. I think with male athletes, it's actually going to be something a little bit worse, because you're going to be looking at the next guy over there saying, hey, he got an NIL deal. He's getting money infused to his bank account. I'm not. And I think that female athletes, kind of, as you mentioned, they look at it a little bit differently. Before we wrap up, do you have anything that I missed on my end that you want to tell people about your recruiting process? Again, episode 2, your journey to the University of Alabama. No, just everyone's process, everyone's journey is going to be so different. And when you start trying to compare journeys or follow it exactly in someone's footsteps, that's when you kind of will end up off the path. And just continue trusting you are exactly where your feet are. If one door closes, it's because that wasn't the best fit for you. Even if you thought it was going to be, there's going to be another fit that works best for you in your future that you just can't see yet.
All right, so be sure again to follow us on social media at Jim Tara and at _coach, at Cassie _. It's right in front of me too. At coach _Cassie RB, and emails your question, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Next week, we're discussing year one as, what do they call it? What's the singular version of Crimson Tide?
Just year one of a member of Crimson Tide, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's not like UCLA where you're a Bruin. It's kind of like Notre Dame where it's just a plural name throughout.
Yeah.
You're not a Fighting Irish. You're fighting Irish men or women.
Crimson Tide. Yeah.
Okay. So year one on campus, episode 3, next week. That'll be a lot of fun. What kind of what will we hear? Any good stories next week?
I have a couple planned. First day of conditioning and 101 heat, all that good stuff.
All right. Well, we appreciate you all listening, watching. Be sure to watch on the YouTube side, Softball Strength Academy, and of course, like and subscribe, leave a review, Apple, Google, Spotify, and we will talk to you next week.